Let's talk about something else involving the White House. An absolutely stunning story in the Washington Post this morning about back in 2011 when somebody fired 7 shots at the White House, and obviously a deranged person from down on the ellipse. The people, the Secret Service agents on top of the White House, the ones there, thought that the shots had hit the White House. It turned out that the president's children were there. The president and his wife were not there. And then suddenly a mysterious call comes over the Secret Service line saying, everybody stand down. There were no shots. And then for 4 days, the Secret Service put out a story that there were stray shots because there was apparently an exchange of gunfire between 2 gangs. Later, a White House maid discovered that one of the windows in the White House had been shot out 4 days after that. And they finally got to investigating this. What are we to make of this?
Well, one thing we make of this is that the Secret Service has profited for many, many years, and our presidents as well, by the myth of invulnerability. The myth of infallibility, in fact, and the idea that the Secret Service can be on top of every situation is, in fact, not true. And we've seen it again with the fence jumper with the knife. In this case, the Secret Service felt it was a very confused situation. He was firing from 700 yards away. They didn't think it was involved at first. As you say, it took 4 days for them to find out. Interestingly, about the story in Ruth and Michael's paper today by Carol Leonnig, a great story, it talks about how the president and the first lady themselves were angry, not just at the failures that night to recognize the threat, but to even tell them later on that they had found the bullets that had hit the White House. So that was a point of stress between the president and the people who protect him, which is obviously always a dangerous and a difficult situation.
What concerns me, Bob, is that the inevitable response to this is to remove the American people even further from being able to literally see their government. So we now have a new fence at the White House. You're getting moved further and further back. You can't get in, it's difficult to get into the Capitol. It's difficult to see the White House. We need to figure out a way to both prioritize protecting the president and the first family, and to make sure that we're not just living in a Fortress Pennsylvania Avenue situation.
Well, you know, I mean, it really, I mean, it breaks my heart to see some. I don't want this story to be true. I don't want it to. I've known these Secret Service agents all the way back to the Johnson and Kennedy administration. They are brave men and women. They have devoted their life. They're willing to put their lives on the line. But something's going to have to be done here. This is a bureaucracy that, it seems to me, is just going to have to find some way to fix itself, or somebody's going to have to fix it, and it's not fixed yet.
That may be true. We should also remember crazy things like this have been happening at the White House for a long time. So for people who are hearing these stories and may feel like suddenly there's this influx, there's a lot of attention being paid now. But there was a gunman who fired shots at the Clinton White House circa 1994, and also around that time, a man crashed a small plane into the White House, very small, a Cessna, basically crumpled up and did no damage. So you're just never going to be able to do, and you're never going to be able to solve the problem that the White House is a target of sorts for crazy people. And I think you just minimize the risk as much as you can while having a balance of some access to the public. And I think we're actually in a fairly good place right now, actually.
I think, that being said, there is a lot of reports out there about an agency that is under stress. It is undermanned. People are overworked. You hear about people coming into out in a field office in Cleveland. They're supposed to come do a couple of weeks in Washington. They're here for months.
Well, their budget's been cut,
their budget's been cut. And then also the bigger issue, which you talk about, which is maybe not always being exactly fulsome with things that have happened, which seems to be the bigger concern, because there has to be absolute trust there between that agency and those that they protect. So it seems like there has to be some sort of huge investigation and kind of a top to bottom review of how you fix this. Maybe this is a moment.
Michael Gerson, the other big issue that almost is getting, well, it's not getting the attention it deserves because of, you know, we've gone to war here, and that's Ebola.
Right, exactly.
Where are we on that?
Well, right now, the disease has not spread to Nigeria and other places as was feared. So we have a disease that is largely contained, but absolutely catastrophic in the countries where it is now. You could have, the CDC had an estimate this week of a worst case scenario of 1.4 million infections. That's not likely, but you could see hundreds of thousands of infections that would essentially break these countries. The response of the world has been significant and late. Probably should have acted 2 months ago. U.S. military action that the president announced is not likely to be in place for 4 to 8 weeks as we're having exponential increases in infection. And he pleaded at the UN this week for other countries to join this effort. So we have a huge humanitarian challenge here. This is not likely to spread to New York or Paris. We know how to control a disease like this. But it is catastrophic in the areas where it is now.
And it could be worse, but it's not likely to spread. But the nightmare scenario is that it mutates and becomes more easily transmittable. For instance, it's not transmittable through the air. But it's possible it would mutate and that would happen. And we obsess, and we have obsessed in this country for more than a decade about terrorists with a weapon of mass destruction. And part of what President Obama is trying to do now is to counter radicalization around the world, kill radicalization at its roots. We need a better public health infrastructure, particularly in a place like Africa, to make sure that we don't have Ebola doesn't in fact turn into a weapon of mass destruction that could devastate this country.
Ebola or other health threats.
Many other diseases.
All right, we have to stop there. Thank you all so much. We'll be back in a minute to say thank you to one of baseball's greats.